Have you got a new camera?
No, I've got the that car lamp
Yeah.
set up again, but this time without without glue that melts. Okay, so let's try this. Hello, Mike.
That's it.
How are you today?
That's exactly what's happening.
Great, good. Okay, fantastic.
Hi, I'm Mike Brampton.
And I'm Julian Hode.
Welcome to episode 3 of Veterinary Ramblings.
Except it's episode 4, isn't it, Mike? Five, 4, 3, 2.
Hi, I'm Mike Brampton.
And my name is Julian Hode.
Welcome to Veterinary Ramblings. So we've got a special guest tonight, Julian.
Yeah, who we got tonight?
He's got super guy. I didn't realise that he was involved in quite as much as he actually is.
Yeah.
He's known to a lot of people in the veterinary industry, and some people say that he is the frog whisperer.
I think I know him. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, the frog whisperer.
Some say if there's a snake in the room, he's got it handled. There's a lot of work with exotic birds and all sorts of stuff. But what you probably don't know is he's also a very well-known author. Let's get Matt Rendle in. Matt, good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you? Okay?
Excellent. Yes. Well, as well as we could be. I'm really excited, Matt. Sorry, Julian?
As well as could be expected, thank you.
Except, look, let's get the drink counter going here. So this is a Negroni.
Yep.
And Negroni has 2 shots of gin. This is Plymouth gin. Other gins are available.
You've got through most of that bottle, mate. You showed that as a new bottle last week.
No,
Yes, you did.
I use it to cook.
Right. Okay. Right.
Well, yeah, I did a bit of drinking while I was cooking.
Yeah. Gin and prawns.
It's got martini, gin and prawns. Now there's a nice one, isn't it?
Mm.
That's a Greek dish.
Yeah.
Bit of martini.
Double shot of martini.
And some Campari. So it's
And a double
2
shot of
gins,
Campari.
1 martini, 1 Campari. So I think Campari is 25%, and martini is probably very little. That's only 15%. There you go.
15%. Yeah.
Or it's a soft drink.
And your Plymouth gin is 60% overproof navy.
60%. So I raise you your gin and tonic to my 4, possibly 5 drinks already. Get that counter going.
And Matt's got orange
Squash. Yeah.
Which is great. And actually, we're going to wish tomorrow morning that we'd had that orange squash instead, aren't we?
Quite probably.
Have you covered up your chairs, by the way? Is that a sort of? Are you decorating your room?
Oh, it's because I'm in the cat's bedroom.
Oh, I see. Right.
That's not a euphemism for something. I'm genuinely in the bedroom the kitten sleeps in. So she pretty much destroys everything. So.
Good. I thought it was some sort of Mrs. Faversham type of scenario, where all the.
If that's how you want to imagine me, that's absolutely fine, Julian. You know.
No.
I'm really excited to welcome you tonight, Matt, because what you probably won't know is that when I used to race bicycles, I used to race for a trade team called Blazing Saddles. And of course, Blazing Saddles is the title of one of your top-selling books. And it's all about the unusual. I'll show you if you like. It's all here. Here we go. Blazing Saddles, The Cruel and Unusual History of the Tour de France. And I'm just thinking, what a crazy coincidence that is.
Yeah. Mike.
Yeah.
I don't think that's how Matt spells his surname.
Sadly not, no.
and I'm fairly sure Matt hasn't done the Tour de France. Am I right there, Matt? I'm not being
Yeah,
disparaging.
that's a fair assumption, Julian. I think. Yeah, I've not done the Tour de France. I've been
I
to
think
France
it's got a
once on a
cyclist
school
to me.
trip, but yeah,
Yeah.
not me.
Yeah.
Oh,
You fucked up, haven't you, Mike?
Oh.
Was that a Google search?
yeah.
Did you put the whole of Matt's name in, RVN as well,
Oh, yeah.
or just?
No. No, and it all came up, and I got all excited, and obviously you know that I've been racing bicycles for years, and so bicycles, and a little bit like Graham, when Graham came up, and he'd written about all of the great climbs in the Tour de France and riding a bicycle and everything, and I just got a bit excited.
I think you're getting fixated on the Tour de France connection there, Mike. It's very unlikely, isn't it, that anyone we invite from the veterinary field will also be major eventers in the Tour de France, isn't it? I know one or two, but not the one or two we've had.
Okay, then, as you say.
I think I do own a yellow jersey somewhere, but that's as close as I get, I think. So.
Well, that's good. That's good. That'll help Mike. I'm sure get over his pathetic error. Good. Sea Shepherd, is it?
Yeah.
Ah, excellent. Do you want to tell us a bit about that Sea Shepherd? While you're getting another drink, I better explain to people who aren't necessarily able to watch this that Mike is wearing a jolly nice long sleeve T-shirt that says Sea Shepherds on it. I have absolutely no idea what the relevance for that is, but because it was clearly new and he's proud of it and he's just made a terrific boob about Matt's name, I thought I'd better try and redeem him by bringing his T-shirt into context.
Excellent. Well, it was actually Oceans Day or Protection of the Oceans Day this week. But let me break off just for a moment because I'm going to mix myself up a nice gin and tonic, a Shetland Reel. I seem to have a thing for these
Shetland Reel?
Yeah. So I'm going to mix that up,
gins are available.
I will share that with you now.
Great.
Pre-recorded that, Matt, so don't worry about it. Right.
Okay,
How many of these have you done?
We've done a few.
A few.
It's seamless. It's all seamless.
Right. Great.
So tonight, I'm going to prepare you a special one, which is the Shetland Reel. Now, I'm particularly into ocean stuff, as you can probably tell by the T-shirt that I'm wearing. So a nice Shetland Reel from another Scottish distillery. Seem to have a thing about Scottish distilleries, don't you think? So, first off, in goes the ice. Secondly, you'll have noticed already that I do like to zest the fruit that I use. The smell of a drink as I rub this around the rim is half the experience of the flavour. I'm just going to cut the edge off here because this makes it easier just to put that dribble of lime into the top. Now for the Shetland Reel. This is also a very good one with sea kelp, but I haven't got any sea kelp with me, so I'm going to keep it simple with the lime. Nice measure of gin there, and in that goes. Sticking with my favourites, Fever Tree, my special mixer I'll throw at you. My special mixer here. So just pour this down. This aerates the tonic as it dribbles down there and mixes into the gin. There we go. Just aerates that out. So, Shetland Reel, they're good for several. They do different flavours, but this is one of my particular favourites, the Shetland Reel, Ocean. Good, simple flavours. Very, very nice. Cheers.
So Matt, having discovered now that you're not a leader in the Tour de France authorship series, you are actually rather more better than that, aren't you? If I may use the term so ungrammatically correctly, you're better than anyone in the Tour de France because you are one of the leading veterinary nurses for exotic species in England, if not the world. Is that right?
I don't know about the world, but yeah, I'm reasonably experienced with exotic species, and I've worked in lots of different places with wild species as well. So yeah, I've done my time. So even tapirs, yeah.
Even tapirs.
Yeah, 3 species, but yeah, very nice.
Tapirs, very good for the heart. There's a tribe in Borneo that eat primarily tapir meat, and they have the lowest incidence of cardiac disease in the world.
My friend did his PhD on resource partitioning in Colombia, and he says to this day, smoked tapir was the tastiest thing he's ever eaten. So
is that right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be very tasty, but
being in Colombia, he probably drunk something.
Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt on this one, but it's really in eating the animals.
Not good.
I readily appreciate that we eat animal flesh, and as you know, I'm fairly into a sort of a keto style of diet, which almost excludes vegetables and carbohydrates. But
can I stop you there, Mike? Sorry, my pangolin's burning. I'll take it off the stove.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matt.
Sorry about that.
we just killed that. I'm going to make a gin.
Look at that. You're impressed, aren't you? The nose is a bit long. Because it was fine, but it sort of stretched as it dried. And in the end, I had to get a pencil under it, just like that, to stop it drooping anymore.
That's definitely the best homemade tapir I've ever seen, I have to say.
So I couldn't do the legs, so I had to have him lying down.
Right.
But look, really, very little difference, isn't there?
They're almost identical, actually, Julian. But what concerns me is that a person known for his orthopedics couldn't do legs. What's that all about?
Legs are tricky old things, Mike.
Yeah.
They're mushy. You can't do a thing with them. My orthopedics in slugs has never really taken off.
Fair enough. You were determined to get tapirs in early, weren't you?
I wanted to get tapirs in. Yeah. They're my favourite odd-toed ungulate.
So what's the link, Matt? I mean, you were saying that your friend's PhD is in tapirs.
He did his
resource partitioning, I think.
Sorry, resource
partitioning in reptiles in Colombia.
Right.
So he spent 4 or 5 years living in Colombia doing his PhD.
Right.
And mostly eat chilies and rice is basically what your diet consists of, and fish. And I think the fish gets a bit samey quite quickly. So the tribe that he was living next to, he helped out on a few occasions, and they would bring him the odd bit of tapir every now and again as a treat, which he said he kind of refrained from for a brief period of time, and then found out it's actually delicious. But yeah, I can't say that it always makes me smile because people often ask him about his cuisine, and he often refers to that being the favourite thing he's ever eaten. He's eaten lots of strange stuff, but yeah. Have you ever met a tapir, Julian?
I have. I've met many a tapir. I would love a tapir for my birthday. It's in August.
Right.
There's a wildlife park just outside Somerset that have some tapirs, Brazilian, not Malayan, and there's one very, very friendly one that comes along and you can stroke its back.
They're very friendly.
Yeah, they can give a nasty bite though, can't they?
The Indicus, the Malayan ones, yeah, they can break your fingers, but the Brazilian ones don't tend to be. They're much calmer. but they're
Yeah.
amazing animals. Did they let you scratch it down? Did they let you scratch it so
Yeah.
it laid them? So they
Yeah.
fall over, scratch them. They're bizarre.
It did. I thought I'd pushed it or done something. I thought it would have fainted, but suddenly it's rolled over. And they said, "You've got to tickle its tummy now."
Yeah,
And
I taught one to do it, and to the point that we could X-ray its legs and blood sample it and do all sorts of stuff. It's a very deep.
Really?
Once they go into that deep, overwhelming happiness, and they're pretty safe for a long period of time. Amazing animals.
So
Quite
that's
incredible.
not like trancing it, is it? Or is it?
No, it's a pleasurable experience because they lay down by themselves.
Right.
So trancing is a fear response rather than that. So tapirs have no gallbladder, Julian. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No, they have no gallbladder.
Yeah, they have no gallbladder.
Gosh.
Anyway, that's a good pub quiz question for you.
Yes.
I've just had So is this it? Is this us doing it? Because it's going ever so well, I feel.
It's going all right. It never gets deeper than this, really.
This is it.
Is it?
Every now and then, one of us will do a quote from an old Pete and Dud, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and they used to do this sketch with Dudley Moore as the interrogator, and as Peter Cook as usually Sir Arthur Grebe Streebling, or Sir Arthur Streebling.
I spent the last 30 years of my life attempting unsuccessfully to teach ravens to fly underwater.
And just saying, teaching ravens to fly underwater will instantly segue into any interesting stories about ravens, Matt? See how it works. It's great, isn't it? Seamless stuff.
It's quite seamless. So, funny you should say that, Julian, but yeah, I've had the fortune or misfortune in some respects to treat a raven that belongs to the Queen. So the Queen obviously has her ravens at the Tower of London. I think Mike and I had quite a stressful morning with one of the ravens from the Tower of London.
Oh, I remember that, Matt. What happened was that we'd got to look at. We were sort of doing an annual MOT on the Queen's ravens, the ravens from the Tower of London, and I'd produced a cloacal pulse oximeter sensor. And the concept was that we were going to be able to knock these ravens down and monitor them to very high levels, and everything was going to be absolutely fine. And what we were unaware of, was it the Raven Master or something, Matt?
The Raven Master, yeah. So he's the head yeoman that his whole job is just looking after the ravens.
So
and they're normally people who've held a really high position in the army, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're normally people that have either been in special forces or something along those lines, who then, for whatever reason, get to the point that they can no longer do their full job. So then they get invited to become a yeoman of the Tower of London. It's an amazing thing, amazing opportunity for them. And they live on site in the Tower of London. So they have these little houses that are built into the tower, and they live. And amazing. They're incredible people.
It's great.
Amazing.
It was great fun. I mean, but one of the intriguing things I find is that the Raven Master, this new Raven Master, he'd had his instructions the night before or several days before with what we had to do with the ravens and what he was supposed to do. And bless him, he rocked up with, I can't remember how many there were, and we knocked the damn thing out, didn't we? And we got a raven in the background there, Julian. You need to.
I got a small raven I stole from the tower a few years back. It was either that or the crown jewels. Couldn't decide which to get, and the raven
it's either a black cat or it's a raven. But anyway, so we induced anaesthesia on the first one, and went to intubate said patient, which immediately vomited. So all hands went to decks to try and clear the whole airway, protect the airway and the works on this vomiting raven. And this hardcore special forces guy had felt sorry that they weren't going to get their breakfast. So he'd fed them just before he brought them in.
Yeah, rookie error.
Well,
Oh, no.
yeah, whatever.
Good.
But I suppose the
Good
punchline to
joke.
that, the punchline to all of that was I got home. We had a pretty stressful morning that morning, didn't we? But we saved the bird and obviously cancelled all the rest of them that had come in. But I got home and I was asked, "So the ravens from the Tower of London, how exciting is this? Did you get the pictures? Did you get the video? Did the new pulse oximeter sensor work?" Actually, we were too busy doing. What? You didn't get any pictures? We never did get the pictures, did we, Matt?
No.
we never
How
got
many-
the pictures, but oh well, that's life. That's life.
How many ravens does the Queen have? How many are there at the tower?
From normally they have about 8. So, and they're all rescues. So they're all come from rescue centres from the north of England normally. So yeah, and they're not wing clipped or anything. They can fly, but they just are trained to stand around in the grounds, and they have their own particular areas they stand at. So
It's interesting.
yeah,
With sheep, it's called hefted, isn't it? When they're bonded to a particular area, is that the same term for
I don't know
ravens?
what it would be called. They're very specific. So when he opens the cages, they'll go and stand in their particular area, and that's where they hang out away from the tourists as much as possible.
I naively assumed that they were bred there, or they had a couple of hundred of them. So
yeah, no, they just have, and they tend to. Some of the birds are very old there. They're in their late 20s, and they tend to have contacts with people where injured ravens come in and get rehabilitated, and they end up at the tower.
So when did that start, that tradition?
It depends who you talk to. So if you read historians' guidelines, it was very much early 18th century. But if you talk to the people that are actually know, they think it was pretty much made up in the 19th century. The origins of it because the Tower of London was the first zoological type collection in the UK, and they had polar bears and all sorts of random stuff in the days where they would die and you would just get more. And I think it's a kind of nod to the fact that it was at one point an animal collection, and they kept the ravens. So,
Right.
Yeah, that's the kind of history behind it.
Because they found rhino skeletons and things there, haven't they?
Everything, yeah. So they had lots of. It was in a very different era where they would just have lots and lots of species that would get collected and be gifted, often to the royal family, and then they were kept in cages, in their very small cages, and probably didn't live very long. But it didn't really matter at that point. They didn't have a perception of conservation or endangerment or anything, so they would just ship in a few more. So yeah, it's bizarre, really, when you think about it.
Really bizarre. I like to think that we've made some progress, at least.
I think we're more aware, certainly.
Although, I mean, getting back, if I may, to tapirs or tapirs, I believe they're pronounced that way as well. I would love a tapir. I'd love a breeding pair of tapirs in the garden. Okay, maybe a bigger garden. I'd love to, but I would never get them. I'd never get them because it would be unfair to do that. And yet, people do keep all sorts of ridiculous animals, don't they? They have no idea how to look after them. And I guess as an exotic nurse, a lot of your job must be dealing with the consequences of poor husbandry with those animals.
Yeah, there's lots of people that buy things on a whim, and sometimes with no perception of how long they live for or how big they're going to get, or the challenges of keeping that animal healthy. And that is down to people just not spending the time to research them. And sometimes I find that very challenging. So some species are incredibly intelligent and are struggling. So parrots, particularly, people that buy macaws that don't really realize that they're going to live to 50, 60 years and be incredibly demanding for their whole life and destroy everything that they get hold of. And they keep them solitary. And I was lucky enough to work in Peru for a short period of time, and having seen flocks of macaws where
hundreds of them together.
Incredible, yeah. With the guide laughing at me because I saw like 3 macaws one day and was kind of leaping about with excitement, and then he was like, kind of, you're an idiot. And then the next day we saw a flock of about 700, to the point that your neck was hurting from looking up and seeing them, and you just think, It's just incredible. And to keep something like that in kind of not in contact with its own kind is incredibly hard. And then they're surprised when they start pulling their feathers out or having malnourishment, and it's really sad.
Yeah, it is. And I guess the problem is that they are relatively easy to get hold of, aren't they? You just need to rock up with your money and you take one home with you.
Yeah, I think there's the controls around what you can and can't buy within Europe and the UK is very strange. Even from dangerous animals, some of the things that I think are potentially dangerous are not covered by any licensing, whereas other things that are not particularly dangerous are. So it's a very complicated subject because it is down to the people that own these things to try and look after them properly and work with them safely. But the rules are very, very odd. So you can buy a species of giant centipede that could land you in hospital with one bite. Giant centipede, they're about this big and scary. Scolopendra gigantica is the really dangerous one. And that would bite you to the point that you would end up in so much pain you'd be in hospital. But that's not covered under the Dangerous Wild Animals Act at all.
Oh, no!
Really? No, I'm...
Oh, bollocks.
There we go.
Fucking duck.
So Mike, of course, would never have sexual relations with a duck or any other member of the waterfowl family, for the sake of those listeners who are just now turning on and listening to our recording. Swans, perhaps, swans on a good night, perhaps a boat race night. If they're the nice mute swan, you might go for it, but generally not. Generally, that's the thing. Not, definitely not. I would say welcome back, but that would tell people watching that we'd actually cocked up and lost our Zoom meeting. So we'll pretend that we've just finished the anecdote. We've gone on seamlessly, which works better.
Yeah.
However, had we actually stopped for a while, I probably would have noticed that I actually just looked like a pineapple because I've only got my head in this top part here. You could have given me some sort of signal. There's a chat thing just on the top corner there of the Zoom thing. You could have said, look, fuck's sake, Julian, all you can see is your head. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this back now. There we go. You can see my lovely...
Yeah, because we are professionals, not comedians.
We're certainly not comedians. I don't know about the professional bit, to be honest. There are professions and there are professions. And right now we're looking like a bunch of the oldest professions. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.
You'll drop your glass, it'll break.
No. Well, it might do. I don't know. It's hard to say.
You know, glasses break. Very breakable things, glasses, aren't they, Matt?
Yeah.
Mine's an unbreakable glass. I've got one of these very thick glasses.
Well,
Drop it, Eddie. Go on. Drop it and we'll
you're drinking out of a plastic glass, Matt. Is that what you're saying?
It's not plastic, it's just very thick, like me. But unbreakable, like me.
Talking of unbreakable, other things that are unbreakable normally are tortoises, aren't they? You know, the plastron. Very, very, very tough.
That's the carapace.
The carapace. Plastron's the bottom, isn't it? That's a carapace, yeah. Anyway, but we had a tortoise brought into practice a few years ago with a nasty crack on the carapace, and unfortunately, the owner told us a story about how it had got this crack that was so horrific that you had to sort of stop your nervous laughter. So this poor tortoise, 35-year-old spur-thighed tortoise, had been having a little munch on some dandelions in the owner's garden. And the owner's father came to visit, driving a rusty old Morris Minor, and he popped up on the drive. Quite a steep drive, and he didn't trust the brakes, so he reached out a hand and grabbed this rock from the garden and shoved it behind his wheel. Spent a nice weekend with his daughter, and when he left, he took the rock away from the back and put it back on the lawn where it carried on eating its dandelions. And unfortunately, the poor thing had developed this really nasty crack through having a 3/4 ton Morris Minor on its back for 3 days. And I repaired it with fiberglass, which at the time was the thing to use. Is it still the best thing to use, Matt? Or
We tend not to use fiberglass anymore. It tends to just hold everything together, but it doesn't tend to allow the shell to heal. So we tend to treat them as kind of open wounds now, kind of granulating and epithelializing wounds, and treat them that way. And they do well.
What do you use to cover the wound? Do you just use?
Depends what country I'm in. So plastic bags are very good if you're in a country where you don't have dressing materials. But ideally, you want something that is occlusive, so it kind of holds the water away from the wound if it's an aquatic species, or just holds bugs away. They can lose a lot of fluid through their shell injuries, so it's important to keep it as sealed as you can.
Because they're really quite intricate living structures, aren't they? The shells of tortoises.
Yeah, they hold a lot of blood supply, and they have the ability to shunt blood through their shells to enable them to lose heat and also gain heat. And there's loads of things we just don't know about it. So nobody is really sure whether chelonian shells can absorb UV light. You would think they probably should be able to, because obviously they're the majority of chelonians is their shell, but no one's really sure. And when you see some species bask, they tend to put their heads and their legs completely stretched out, which would make you think that perhaps they can't. But and also when you see sea turtles that are covered in barnacles and plant life and all sorts of things, you'd think that would really inhibit their ability to produce UV light. And there's all sorts of hypotheses about whether they don't get all of that detritus on their shell until they're adults, so by which time they've done most of their growth anyway and their calcium is already sorted. But who knows? We just don't know. So much we don't know.
Interesting.
I can tell you one thing on that. UV light I can't comment on, but I can comment on infrared light. And they seem to be able to absorb infrared light and block that transmission through the shell, but not in other areas. So I'm going to show you a quick little video here. You'll notice, I'll play it again quickly, that you hear the whoosh, which is coming from the heart and the aorta. That's where we're picking up the Doppler sound, is then later picked up as that pulse wave travels out to the carotid artery, is then picked up by the pulse oximeter. So you'll hear the whoosh, and then you hear the beep of the pulse oximeter. Have a listen to this, then we'll talk about the heart.
Yeah. There's a lag, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So have you ever seen, you've seen stuff like that, I think, Matt, haven't you?
Yeah, I think that their blood pressure is very low most of the time, and their ability to shunt and use their renal portal system is very much better developed than we give it credit for. It's used as an excuse sometimes for why things won't go to sleep with gaseous anesthesia, but not sure that's always the case. But they're much more well developed for what they need to do than we give them credit for. So they would be able to cope with extremes that mammals would never be able to deal with. And I think sometimes when it comes to anesthesia, they're a bit more of a challenge, because you need to think about the whole animal and its physiological adaptations for what it does.
Yeah,
I think certainly in that particular case that we were involved in there, one of the surprising things for us was listening to the difference in the heartbeat. Instead of the normal noise from the Doppler, we got this sort of sound, and I found that quite fascinating, because we glibly describe it as a 3-chambered heart.
Yes,
the reality.
That's how I've always...
Well, we describe it as the 3-chambered heart, but the reality of that is, were it a true 3-chambered heart, then you would get oxygenated and deoxygenated blood mixing.
Yes.
So you wouldn't actually see a circulatory saturation of anything near 99%. It would be.
I was just about to question that. 98% on that. So logically, it would be much lower, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's interesting to note there that we call it a three-chambered heart, but there is actually still a central septum, which, whilst that the main vessel isn't absolutely divided, there's no muscular wall there, there is actually a delineation between the two sides. So it's an early development four-chambered heart.
So there's a physical separation. It's not just done by laminar flow. There's no separation just due to left and right laminar flow causing loss of mixing.
As far as I'm aware, do you want to jump in here, Matt? As far as I'm aware, there's actually a separation there.
Yeah, I think it depends on the species. I think a lot of it depends on what they are. But I think it's a combination of things. Their myocardium is not like anything you've ever seen. They're just it's such a flabby, thin, adaptable thing. And their ability to shut off their pneumonic blood supply to enable them to cope with drowning or being underwater for any other reason, or being restricted that they can breathe is amazing, because their lungs are so kind of simple, and gaseous exchange occurs without pressure, so it enables them to be able to be very efficient with their pneumonic exchange, which I think is why they're just, their ability to survive, dive in and live in completely aquatically is down to their circulation, but also the fact that they're able to shunt their blood around very efficiently.
And presumably the hemoglobin molecules are structurally different as well, are they?
Yeah, they're slightly different within them. They don't have a slightly different setup with their hemoglobin, but they can cope with very low levels of oxygen as it is, but they can also cope with circulating and being very efficient when they get that amount of low oxygen saturation still circulating, but they can keep recirculating it and supplying the vital organs that they need to do. And a lot of that is temperature dependent as well.
That's actually that's fascinating, because to a certain extent you're crossing over two areas that I've been involved in my career, and I go back into the 1970s, which Julian will relate to.
Yeah, I was born not far off then, absolutely. Yeah.
Come on. Okay, I'm going to wind the clock back on this.
I'm a 60s child. It's all right.
I was going to say you when did you graduate with your first degree?
85.
Oh, you sod. Okay, so back in 1979, I don't think you were even thought of then, were you, Matt?
No, it would have been 7 then. So.
Bring it on. Back in 79, I was a lab technician, was at college working on a project to prove the concept that the colour of blood changed depending on the amount of oxygen being carried. And we were using a mass spectrophotometer at the time, and the species we were working with were crabs. Now, as everybody listening will know, crab's blood is blue.
It's hemolymph rather than blood, isn't it?
I
believe.
Yeah. Sorry, Matt?
Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, hemolymph, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's actually a zinc rather than an iron based thing. And so what we were doing, because a crab reaches equilibrium with its environment, probably not too far dissimilar to what a turtle does, we were able to match, or we were able to control the amount of oxygen in the environment, and then taking a blood sample and using a mass spectrophotometer, which took 3 hours to analyze one blood sample, we could measure the color of the blood and match that to the amount of oxygen that we knew we were providing. obviously today we take that for granted and we call that a pulse oximeter. But
Interesting. Same theory. Of course, they wouldn't work on members of the royal family, would they?
No, they wouldn't. No, and that's partly because what we were doing, in effect, was measuring the redness of the red stuff.
Yes, rather than the blueness
of the blue
of the
stuff.
blue stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And there is a theory, I understand. I think the gentleman's name is David Icke. I think he was a famous footballer at one point, and he does.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
He does
lizard
shows
blood.
similar to this, and he has actually solved the conundrum associated with the royal family and the blueness of the blue stuff.
Yeah.
Because as David Icke will tell you, the royal family are actually reptiles.
They're reptiles. Do you know, I was trying to download something about that earlier, but unfortunately I was using a 5G signal and someone burnt down the mast. So I never got to
that's
the
because
end
of
of it.
coronavirus.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I thought so. Yeah.
Which of course is perfectly appropriate for the times in which you're looking bemused here, Matt.
No, I'm fine. I feel like I'm soaking up the knowledge.
It's because we've got gin.
If we've got gin, we have gin. Julian has Negroni. I think he's probably on about his second, and I'm probably about my fifth gin by now.
No, I've popped down to gin and tonic now because the Negroni is very, very strong and very, very dry.
Yes,
so I have something a little sweet, very dry.
I enjoy a Negroni. It's a good winter warming drink. I like that.
It's really nice.
No,
I had a Negroni when I was on holiday in Gozo a couple of years back. It was on the list. I thought, I haven't had a Negroni for years. I haven't had a Negroni. So I got this Negroni through, and it was in a glass about that high with a slice of pineapple and some umbrellas and plastic monkeys hanging from it. And I said, what's this? Oh, it's a Negroni. I said, no, this is orange juice with Campari martini and gin in it. It's not the same thing. Yes. Well, you come and show us how to make one. And they invited me back. And I was there mixing this Negroni for them. They said, oh, that's very nice. And then someone came through and said, hey, while you're there, someone just asked for a Manhattan. Could you do one of those for us? I was there for about half an hour mixing cocktails for them. He said, oh, your starter's ready now. Do you want to pop back to your table?
Were you wearing that shirt, Julian?
Probably. I wear this shirt everywhere. It's a vest, really.
You wore that last week, didn't you?
No, it was my parrot shirt last week. This is fish.
Oh, right. This is fish.
Moving on to willy probes, Mike.
I thought you'd never.
Sorry, I said that. No, I realised I said that and shifted on my seat. I didn't mean that I'm moving on to a willy probe. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Viewers, look, that was just, that was a timed movement of myself. Okay, so Mike, would you like to discuss willy probes?
Willy probes? What, you want me to bring that whole pulse oximeter thing?
I think so. I think we need it because this is CPD. Matt, you probably realise that obviously this is a high class CPD, and so we need to be discussing the science of all this.
Okay, well, yeah, okay, no problem at all. I'm going to share my screen with you then. They came through today, and seemingly the willy probe is very popular with nurses, so I'm told. So there's a closer up of the screen there, so we can see we've got an ECG recording, we've got a pulse oximeter playing here, and we've got a capnograph. We won't get into the capnograph waveform. It seems reasonably relaxed and reasonably normal. Yep. 49 on the upper limit, and for capnography, and the respiration rate of 20. And that's where the pulse oximeter probe actually is.
But there's people in Hamburg pay a good price for that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll stop sharing that screen because some of our viewers might find that rather offensive.
So
the pulse oximeter
probe is on the dog's prepuce.
It is. Well, it's not technically. It's right across the dog's willy, but
is it right across the willy?
Yeah, it is. It isn't that regard. But let me tell you a quick story about that, because that has massive significance and is good CPD that we can bring down into simple basic steps. The first recorded use of a pulse oximeter was in veterinary medicine. So the first recorded use of pulse oximetry in veterinary medicine was actually in the early 80s. And it came about whilst I was advising the British Dental Association on minimal monitoring standards. And I was involved with a company that had invented this thing called, or invented and commercialized this thing called a pulse oximeter. We used to anaesthetize, dental patients, children, in the dental surgery for tooth extractions and complicated procedures with no monitoring at all. And children used to die in the dental chair. So the British Dental Association had done a study, and they decided that they wanted to improve their anaesthesia. And as an industry spokesman, I was asked to go and sit on the advisory panel. Cutting a long, boring story short, from one of these meetings, a gentleman I was sitting next to, a very far-reaching dentist who ran a private practice, even
They are quite far-reaching, aren't they? Because they've got to get
right down. Yeah, absolutely. Matt, you're looking really bemused by this.
You're fine. It's always nice to be the only sober person in the room. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't worry about it. We're going to get cut off in 8 minutes, 38 seconds, so I'm going to have to hurry up.
We can do it. That's fine.
We can do this. And he asked me if I would be prepared to let him use a pulse oximeter on his patient, on a special patient of his. And I went, yeah, no problem. So move the clock forwards 1 week, and the special patient was presented. And the problem with this patient was that they didn't have fingers, they didn't have toes, and the dentist concerned was working.
Were they from Norwich?
No, they'd have had extra fingers and toes if they were from Norwich.
Right, okay.
Yeah. He was working with a great big spotlight in the mouth. So I couldn't use the pulse oximeter probe on the tongue.
Okay.
So Arthur, the male lion at London Zoo, presented a bit of a problem for how to make a pulse oximeter work.
Okay.
And the segue there is that the only place I found I could fit this human finger sensor for a pulse oximeter was on Arthur's willy.
So is the take-home message there that lions have small willies, or what? I'm missing the take-home message there. By the way, kudos for getting a probe on a lion's willy and still being alive to tell the story.
Yeah, he was anaesthetised at the time, and I'm sure Matt can tell lots of other stories about where he's been able to put pulse oximeter probes far better than I. The take-home message is, if you want to use your pulse oximeter, find a well-perfused capillary bed.
Hold on, Mike. I'm going to make some notes.
Make some notes, Julian. A well-perfused capillary bed.
Yeah.
Because you're looking for a pulse to make the pulse oximeter work. Okay. It's got to be accessible, because you want to be able to put the pulse oximeter probe on somewhere. Matt, wake up, please. Stop looking down at your phone. Pay attention. Okay.
He's on the high score of Crystal Maze or whatever it is.
Well, he probably is. He's always playing Bubble Pop or something. I don't know what he's doing, but he's not paying attention. Right. So
Panda Pop.
Actually, we'll test him on this. So a well-perfused capillary bed.
Yeah.
That's accessible. And if you can, minimal pigmentation. Because you'll find that if there's a lot of melanin in the skin or in the area that you're trying to work, the incredible intense melanin is there to absorb infrared light. And of course, a pulse oximeter is trying to shine infrared light through the tissues to measure the redness of the red stuff.
So you're saying we've got well-perfused capillary bed.
Yeah.
And minimal pigmentation.
Yep.
And accessible. If you've got those three things right,
yep,
then you'll get a good pulse oximetry reading.
You should get a good pulse oximeter. So Matt, what are the three basics for a good pulse oximeter reading?
I think there's four, but sorry to contradict you, but I think no pigment, somewhere you can get to, and decent amount of blood supply, definitely, and good contact is the other thing.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll give you that.
Yeah,
and that was pretty sciencey stuff, wasn't it? That was
very sciencey.
Yeah,
that was good CPD, I think.
CPD. Have you?
But it
have you got a
doesn't class
certificate?
as CPD just yet, does it?
Sorry,
because it's not CPD unless you reflect on it.
No, you need the certificate.
I've got a certificate, but we can't give the certificate unless people have reflected on it.
Okay, we'd better reflect on the CPD then. Are you ready?
Matt, you happy to reflect on the CPD?
I can't wait.
Okay.
That's enough. I reflected pretty quickly today.
What?
So super quick reflection. I was able to do it pretty much instantly.
That's
Good.
okay.
Here's today's certificate. There we go.
Excellent.
So CPD certificate for watching veterinary ramblings.
Yep.
This is to certify that the participant is recognised as Julian and Mike's little superstar for the year 2020.
Yeah.
And it's signed me and him.
Yep.
So that's a valid CPD certificate. So you can all do a screenshot now and print that out. And
did you get that, Matt?
Great, yeah, marvelous.
Really? No, I'm.
So let me see if we can get him. Let's phone him.
So whether this will make the final cut or not, I don't know. But for those viewers that are listening and not watching, this is all part of the plan. We intermittently cut the meeting and restart just to keep the interviewees on their toes. It's.
I think Matt's blown us out.
Can we make a new mat out of things we have lying around the house?
That's possible. It's an odd thing.
It's an odd thing, isn't it?
Mm.
That's less obvious. How about if I can move it over? Look, there we go. Puts me in sort of shadow. It's the Mistron there. This is the voice of the Mistrons.
I remember that.
Captain Scarlet. Dun, 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 dun. Aquamarine.
No, that was Stingray.
Was it Stingray?
Stingray. Da-da-da-da-da.
Oh, you wouldn't have heard that. I coughed. I put it on mute. Stingray, Aquamarine. I used to fancy her. I did. She was lovely. She really was. I was growing up in my teenage years. I used to look for a woman who had that sort of. And I have to say, I went out with a few of them and realised it's not living the dream after all. You know?
No, it's not. It's a good job you were doing that at that time because, of course, nowadays with this whole Instagram and personal selfie stuff, it's all.
It isn't. Get a bit of trout out going. Yeah. I don't know. You take huge amounts of care of your appearance, as do I.
Well, I was in makeup earlier on tonight, and
was it Deirdre doing it?
No, not tonight. Not tonight. It was Karen.
No? Okay.
And she was putting the powder on because she was saying that she didn't want the spotlights to actually glint off the top of my head.
It's worked very well.
Yeah.
It's nice.
I'm trying to get Matt back here for 2 minutes.
Do you remember the old days of doing a lecture on overhead projectors? And it would take about 5 hours to get a 1 hour lecture down.
Yeah.
And then with PowerPoint, it became sort of 2 or 3 hours to get a 1 hour lecture. And now with podcasts, it's 10 hours to get a 40-minute one out. Yeah.
I think we've lost our guest.
Has he gone?
Yeah, which is a great shame because you were going to tell us a joke, weren't you?
I was going to tell a joke. I was going to tell a joke relevant to Matt because I think he would have really liked this. You introduced Matt as the frog king, I believe.
Yeah.
And so I was going to tell the joke about the wide-mouthed frog. And I know, I'm sure you've heard it, and everyone's heard it, but it always goes one more telling, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's such a cheery little joke about this little wide-mouthed frog. I believe it was in Colombia, and he's walking through the jungle, and he sees a monkey, and he says, "Hello, what are you?" And the monkey says, "Well, I'm a monkey." "Really? Wow! What do you eat?" And the monkey says, "Well, I eat nuts and fruit and leaves." "Wow! I'm a wide-mouthed frog. I eat flies." And off he goes, and he sees a tapir, and he says to the tapir, "Wow! What are you?" And the tapir says, "I'm a tapir. I eat grass and small shrubs and vegetation." "Wow! I'm a wide-mouthed frog. I eat flies." And he goes along and he sees a parrot. He says, "Wow! What are you?" And the parrot says, "I'm a parrot." "A parrot? What do you eat?" And the parrot says, "Well, I eat nuts and seeds and fruit." "Wow! I'm a wide-mouthed frog. I eat flies." And he hops along. He sees a snake. He says, "What are you?" And the snake says, "I'm a snake." He says, "A snake? What do you eat?" And the snake says, "I eat wide-mouthed frogs." And he says, "You don't see many of those around here, do you?"
But on that note, what a fabulous evening.
What a great evening.
Good.
Always good to catch up with you.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt. And I'm sorry you couldn't join us for the
Thanks,
sign-off.
Matt.
But thank you, Matt Rendle RVN, super exotic nurse.
Super vet, super exotic frog man.
Absolutely.
May your dog go with you.
May your dog go with you too, Julian. Good night.
Cheers. Thanks for joining us again tonight, and a massive thank you to Matt.
I'm sorry, unfortunately, we were plagued by technical difficulties once again this evening, and we actually ran out of time for a proper goodbye.
Hopefully, we'll catch up again, and we can have him back for an episode in the future.
Absolutely. Join us next week, though, when we'll be interviewing a very special guest.
Georgie Hollis!
Yay!